we're going to be taking a look at Justice League Axis of Villains. It's a cooperative tower defense game for 2 to 4 players. Basically, you play on a board and try to keep the bad guys from getting to the middle. Let's take a look at it. In Axis of Villains, each player plays a different character, whether that be Batman, Flash, Green Lantern, or Superman. And you're all working together to try to protect the satellite in the middle. So different villains are going to be coming in from the different sides and trying to get to the middle. If 4 arch villains make it to the middle, then you lose the game. Also, if any of these ultra villains that'll come in through special villain card effects get to the middle, you also lose the game. So each player takes their character. Say I'm Batman here. If I'm Batman, I add all of the blue characters to the cup here, who will be basically Batman's arch villains, which are like the Joker, or Bane, or Two-Face, or Scarecrow, typical Batman villains. Or you have Superman with Lex Luthor and Bizarro and Brainiac. And whichever characters are in the game, you add those villains to the cup. So the more players for the game, the more bad guys that are going to be out there for you to fight. Each different villain has a different strength. So here we have Mr. Freeze, who's a 7. And each different hero will have a villain for each number. So you have 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15. So on your turn, at the beginning of the game, there's going to be random villains all over the board in each sector, which you will pull out of a cup. And all the heroes will be placed on the satellite in the middle that they're supposed to protect. So on your turn, you'll roll the dice. And if you get a bad symbol, which is any of the black ones basically, then different effects happen. So this effect here is a new villain comes out of the cup. So you have all the rest of the villains randomly in a cup, or you can turn them face down, either way. And whichever number you rolled on the die is a sector that affects. So this says a new bad guy comes out in Sector 8. So I'd randomly pick one up and put it in Sector 8, which is going to be a Scarecrow. So the different sides of the dice here are new bad guy comes out, the villain in the sector that you rolled, so say this was 8 again, moves 1 forward to the center. This is the villains in Sector 8 would move 2 forward to the center, and then you have 1 again. So those are all the bad symbols, and then you have the Justice League symbol. So Justice League symbol is what you're trying to roll. Whenever you roll the Justice League symbol, your turn actually starts. When it's your turn, you keep rolling these dice until you roll the Justice League symbol. And then you get to move your character that many spaces that is on the 8-sided die, and then they can make an attack if they are in a sector with a villain. So if I had 2 here, I would have the Superman. If I was Superman, I could move 2 spaces. And then the next player would go, and they would roll, and they rolled, and the villain in 2 would move forward 1 space. And you roll again, and whoever's turn it was, you would get to move if you finally roll the Justice League symbol. So the game can swing back and forth depending on if you keep rolling the bad symbols, you just keep rolling the die until you finally get the Justice League symbol to take your turn. So the bad guys can do a whole bunch of stuff, and it can compound really fast until you roll the Justice League symbol. And it's fun when we're playing with our friends, we'll be like, dude, just roll the Justice League symbol, please, take your turn. It does have a little bit of a roll to move aspect with the die, because if you roll a 1 on the die and you get the Justice League symbol, you take your turn to move 1 space, which is kind of disheartening. But a lot of the characters have abilities that allow for special movement. So the abilities all key off of the different cards here. So each player is going to get 2 of these cards, and mostly these cards have different symbols on them. So the symbol here would let you use the top power. So Batman's top power is other players can play cards on his turn for combat with that symbol. So they'd be able to play like some things for the dice or different things like that to let you roll more combat dice. And then here, Batman can move adjacent to any spot. So these different symbols, the different colors, show which color of the ring you can move here. So if I'm in red, I can use this power with this card. If I'm in green, I can use this power with this card. And if I'm in yellow, I can roll 3 extra dice during combat, which is pretty ridiculous. You always roll 1 dice against people that you're not arch villain with, and then you roll 2 dice against people that you're good against. So I'll be better against the Joker and Scarecrow, the people that are actually Batman villains, and while the Flash's villains I might not be as good against. So basically the way combat works is whenever you end your turn in a space that has a villain, so let's say the Joker's here, and I'm Batman, and I managed to roll high enough to move up to him, I would roll 2 dice, since he is a blue character, and then if I get up to the number here, if I equal it, then nothing happens and I don't move. If I'm below it, I have to move back to the satellite, and if I'm above it, I actually get to defeat the villain and draw another hero card, so I can have more abilities and more powers to be able to use. So Joker here is 15, so with my 2 dice, it would be ridiculously hard on 8-sided dice to defeat someone who's 15. So that's where you really have to cooperate together to fight those sort of characters. If there's another person in the space with you, say it's my turn, I'm Batman, I move on to the Joker, and the Flash is already here, I would get to roll the dice twice, and the Flash would also get to roll the dice once, and we'd add it all together. And if it's higher than 15, we defeat the villain. If it's 15, then we stay, and if it's lower, then I move back to the satellite. So it's a lot of fun trying to figure out where to strike first, because if you take out a bunch of the lower guys, you'll get to draw more cards and keep your cards coming in, and then maybe save these cards that like give you 3 extra dice for battle when you're fighting against some of the bigger guys. And figuring out when to use these cards and when to save them is very important in the game. So whenever you defeat a villain, you get to draw another card. Also, if a villain ever lands on a hotspot, which are these little arrows here, they look like the back of the villain card here, basically, with the little arrows. You have to draw a villain card, and they'll do a lot of different things. Like this one says, select captured villain with the lowest strength number. Roll the d8, and then each villain that has that number you have to put back in a sector. So if I had captured Doomsday with Superman, and he was the lowest one because he's a 7, I'd have to roll the die, and I got a 1, so he'd have to go in Sector 1. So the bad guys that you've captured already and beaten can come back out when they land on these hotspots and different things. And there's all sorts of different cards that are in here. They can move a whole bunch of people, randomly select extra guys from the cup, move people in 2 spaces, so they do a whole bunch of different things. And they can also bring out the Ultra Villains. So Ultra Villains are really bad news because all the Ultra Villains are gray. So they're normally really high numbers, like Amazo here is 17. Also, since he's gray, nobody's going to get to roll 2 dice on them just by themselves. So you're really going to have to team up against these guys. Another bad thing about the Ultra Villains is if they get to the middle by themselves, they destroy all 4 pieces of the satellite and you lose the game immediately. So you really have to focus on those guys and try to take them out. Each time a guy comes to the middle, the pieces of the satellite can be flipped over to mark that a piece has been destroyed, and then the villain will move all the way back out after they've moved in. But yeah, you can have a bunch of different people pile up, especially when you keep rolling the things to have people come out of the cup. So you can have a bunch of villains. Sometimes you do really good and people roll the Justice League symbol back to back, so you get to take your turn. It's a pretty cool little tower defense game. That's how the game works. You're just trying to keep the guys from getting to the middle. I think it's a pretty fun game, even though it's very random. The fact that you don't get to take your turn until you roll the Justice League symbol on the dice can make it swing where you're taking your turn, I take my turn, he takes his turn, this guy takes his turn, and you feel really good as the heroes. You're like, yeah, we're stomping them, we're running over here, we're taking those guys out, we're taking these guys out, and that's really exciting. But then sometimes a player will grab the dice and roll, and they won't get it, the Justice League symbol, and they'll roll, and they won't get the Justice League symbol, and they'll roll, and they won't get the Justice League symbol. And so lots of monsters are moving, bad guys are moving, villains are moving, and you're hitting hot spots. All kinds of stuff can escalate in one turn, which kind of makes it really like tense, because you really want that Justice League symbol to show up, but it also makes the game swing very random, because you could smash everybody in one turn if you rolled the perfect stuff on the die, or you could lose the game in one turn if you kept rolling the bad symbols to make more bad guys come out, and the symbols to make the bad guys move. It's kind of interesting though, if you like clear out a certain section, then when you roll that number on the die and it's telling you to move there, the bad guys, there won't be anybody there to move, so it's like, oh, okay. So you spend a lot of time re-rolling the dice sometimes when they don't actually have any effect, and it's still a relief though, because you're happy because nothing bad actually happened. Me and my friends have had a decent amount of fun playing this game. I've won it before, I've lost it before, and it really just depends on how fast you can take care of the bad guys, because when it builds up too much, there's too many guys on the board, then it stinks. And it's really interesting how certain heroes are good against certain bad guys, and when the ultra villains come out, it's really hard to take care of them because nobody's good against fighting them, so you have to make them a priority. We've had games where people just spend their turn moving to a bad guy and sitting there because we're all going to need to fight one bad guy together. And so that really makes the cooperative part come out, because you have to work together to beat some of these stronger guys. The guys that are 15 and 13 and all the ultra villains, you're pretty much going to have to work together to fight. So you can't just run the show with one person. That makes it a lot of fun. I definitely like the theme, comic book characters, DC. It's a lot of fun being able to play some of your favorite characters from that. And if you don't mind randomness and you don't mind playing a really light game, it's also great with kids, I think. Take a look at picking up Axis of Villains.